we are discussing about generic programming, and we have discussed in the last two videos how a method can be declared generic, how a class can be declared generic. Next we will discuss about how a class can be declared generic, but with multiple type of parameters. Before going to start this discussion, I want to discuss what are the different points, or there are certain points which are very important to note down. So, those points will be discussed quickly, and then we will discuss about syntax of defining a generic class with multiple type of parameters. So, more than one, and we will illustrate the concept with the examples so that we can learn this concept. Now, I just quickly recapitulate certain points which is important to note. The first is generic is very good, so that it can allow you to take a program in a general ways, not a specific way. That means a program can deal with any type of data, but there are few points. If you declare a type as a template, this means that to mention that any type it can holds, but in that declaration, in any parts, in any method, you cannot declare a variable of generic type. For example, this kind of declaration in any method inside the generic class is basically invalid. This is because what actually this is supposed to do? This is supposed to do that A is a name of an object of type T, and we want to allocate the memory for this object using new. We want to store 5 different objects into this object arrays. So, A is basically an array of objects whose size is 5, this one. Now, here actually your compiler will fail to obey this instruction, although meaning is like this, but it is not possible. This is because compiler cannot allocate the memory at the time of compilation until the actual type of data is known. So, as you have mentioned the template, that means actual type of data is not known. So, compiler will not be able to fail. For example, if say T is for integer, then integer needs 16 bits, that is fine. So, then if know that it is integer, then T is integer, it can work. But suppose T is instantiated for a user defined data type, say student, who is basically string and floating point, values 1 marks. So, it needs maybe say 50 bytes. So, it is not known to at the time of compilation, therefore, this is not a valid declaration inside any program. You should not do that. And then, so this is the one thing that you have to write your program whenever you want to do it. Another point that we have learned about, in a generic class, a method, if you want to declare it as a generic, you can do. That method also can be declared as a static, non-static method as well as overloaded method, all are possible. This example shows how a method can be declared as a static method. As you see, this is the main class. We declare a gprint1 method, which basically you can pass. Here actually we make the method simple, but this method is generic and this is a static. This means that this gprint method can be called without creating any object of this type. For example, here we, after defining this class which includes a generic method, and here the main method which basically use gprint, but this method is called for integer values, this method calls for string, and this method is called for floating point values. So, here the static is basically there, we did not create any object of this type. If you create non-static, then we have to create first an object, say x, generic static x, then x dot gprint 101, it could be. But here as we made the declaration static, we can have these benefits that objects, without creating an object, a method can be called as it is a static. Now, so this is the one, and then other things that a method also can be overloaded. Now, here is another example that how a generic method in a generic class also can be declared. In the previous example, there we did not make the class generic, but here in this example we make the class as generic. So, T, and then the method this one as a generic. So, this means that this method can also call for this type T or any other template type, also it will work. So, it is generic class, that means this class can hold for any type of objects. Inside it a method which is again declared here static, but it can call for any types. Now, this is an example here after declaring this on the generic class which includes a generic method, the driver class to give a demonstration of this. So, main method and here you see how we create the three different executions. One, this is A for an array of integer objects. This is another execution for string, and this is another execution for double values. Then the print method can be called for any type because it made generic, this for string and this is for double. So, this way the static as well as generic class also can work. So, these are the 3 points that we have to discuss it, and another point also we can just here that a method can be declared as overloaded. I will come to that example, but before going to this, one again important point, I am just emphasizing it again and again, that in parameter type, that is for the template, in parameter type that is for template T, you should always call these objects for only type of objects, but not of other type called primitives like this one. That means here you cannot create int or char or double like. This is basically, as you see here in this example, this is not error because of this one, it cannot be. Here also this is not because of this one, this is not valid, not legitimate. On the other hand, this is because of this is also and this is also because this. So, this is the one important point that you should know and you should remember when you work with generic class. Now, I will discuss about another point which basically multiple type parameters while discussing generic class. Now, this is an example that you can note, this is a generic class discussion, but here we discussed in this example 2 different templates. So, T and V. That means any two type can be holds here. Now, rest of the things are similar, but as we have to deal with two types, so there will be two different what is called the data to be considered, T type and V type. So, object 1, it can be a single value or it can be an array of elements, no issue. This is also either single or any arrays it can be, but you have to discuss. And then one constructor needs to be declared which basically initialize the elements for this class. So, these are the basically constructor that can initialize. Okay, so we have learned about same way of extending the concept for more than one type of parameter. The same concept can be again extended 2, 3, 4 any type. So, here list of types should be mentioned separated by comma. So, T, U, V, W, T, comma, U, comma, V, comma, W, like any types, any numbers. So far Java development programming is concerned, there is no limit, maximum up to 256 number of arguments that you can pass. Beyond 256, the Java virtual machine will not allow you to do that. Now, let us have an example about this generic class with multiple type parameters. So, what in summary we can say that we can create a generic class with only one type or any type of parameters, so that more than one type of parameters that can be managed by your generic program. Now, let us illustrate this concept with an example. The example is very simple, easy to understand, a little bit you have to closely watch the program. In this program, we declare a generic class, the name of the class is GC2. We pass two templates T1 and T2, indicating that two different types that needs to be considered. It can be integer, it can be string, it can be integer or anything, absolutely no issue. Any order also not an issue. So, this is the usual constructor basically which will initialize, these are the two data that it is in this class. And this is the one method, this method will print the value or elements stored in these two objects. So, print object 1, print object 2. So, this is a very simple one declaration about generic class. You can note that similar concept, but only one added types. Now, the main class showing the execution of this class GC2 test, which includes the main method. Now, here you see we create GC2 objects of type object 1, the name of the object you can say A, B, C, whatever it is there. In this case I just did it for OBJ1, no issue. But here you see for this class, for this object OBJ1, the first element, that means this one is basically of type string, the second, this one is of type integer. Now, when we call this, we have to instantiate it passing values for initialization. We pass string value GC and integer value 9. This means that this one is an object is created whose two fields are, one is string and another is integer value. And the print method, this print method is called here for this. It will print GC and 9 one by one. Again in the next execution we create another instance OBJ2, but here instance is first type is integer, second is double, and we pass the values this one as an integer and double, and we print it. So, it will print 1, 2, 3 and 1.2 in this case. So, what we have understood here is that a generic class with two type of parameters are defined. They can be called for any types, whatever it is there, string, string, integer double, integer string, string double, whatever it is, absolutely no problem. Not only this, in addition to any type defined by user like student, book, person also can be placed here and it will work. You can test the same program using another defined class of your own and then run it. You will see it will work for whatever the data type, not only the standard data type like integer, double, string, also for user defined data type. So this basically works for, if it works for two type, I should say that it should also work for any number of types. In that case only the number of types of parameter that you want to mention, you have to write it here, and that is all. So, this is basically the idea that it will work for you. Now, we have learned about generic class with two parameters, and this is another example explaining the same thing a little bit in a different way. Let us check the program. This is another generic class with two parameters. We define is two parameters TP. So, this is the name of the generic class pair data. We declare as a private, no issue, you can declare public, protected, whatever it is, at no issue here. Now, we declare T of type 1, V is of another type. They may be same type, no issue, but okay, fine. And this is the constructor. We pass the value for this type of object T, another value for the type of object V. A and B are the two objects of type T and V. We pass it while we create these generic objects and then instantiate it. So, it is basically X, whatever value it will pass. Now, this is the one method T get value and V get value. So, here you note it, the get value and this get value are the two methods overloaded. This method will return X, this data, on the other hand this method will return Y. So, two methods are there. Alternatively, okay, fine. So, these are the method which basically return the values of X and Y which is there for the generic elements. And print data, as we see here, is a method which basically print the X component of it and Y, the Y component of it. So, it is basically print the elements which are stored in the generic objects defined by this generic class pair data. So, this program again simple, but I repeat it intentionally so that you can understand it again with the different view of it. That is okay. Now, let us see how the same program can be utilized in your main. So, the driver class, it looks like this. Again, let us see the driver class here. So, it is multi-parameter generic class test demo. Now, here in this example, as we see, we create an object. A is the name of the objects which includes two elements. The first element is string, the second element is string, and then we just pass, these are the values of the objects to this A. So, X is here and Y of this object store this value, and this print will basically print these are the two elements. Now, in the second example here, again we call the object, say let it be B, for the type first is of string type, second is of integer type x and y, and instantiated this one. The next run here C object is created, first field is integer, second is string, we pass it. In the next last one it is integer and double, pass it. So, what we have done here, the generic class that we have declared as a pair data for two types of elements, and they can be executed at the time of running, that means dynamically passing different value. So, this is a great example the way generic class supports strongly for any type of objects generically and more significantly dynamically. So, during the program it can be okay. So, this way the generic class with two parameters, as we have explained here, it works for us. Now, method overloading, as I told you, it also works for you, and this example takes a short what is called the demo of method overloading. Here what we are doing, you see, we declare one user defined class. The name of the class is student, which has two fields, the name field and marks composed of the marks of 3 subjects as a integer like, and this is the constructor to initialize the object of this type. And this is the print method, print student, and here how this print student method will work, basically printing the different element, name print and then score, the total of the score value will be printed here, that is all. Okay. So, it will print name and then whatever the value it is stored there, it will be printed the total. So, this is one simple declaration of a user defined class. Having this declaration, we want to see how the methods in it can be defined in an overloaded fashion, and here is an example. Again we can repeat it for the two type parameters. So, this basically define a generic class with two template type T and S. So, T here we have defined that it can store an array of objects, B also is an array of objects of type S, here is an array of object of type T, A is an array of object type T, B is an array of object type S. This type at the time of writing program we do not know, it can be anything. And this is the way of initialization, we pass x and y are the reference and then it will be okay initialized. Get data, here you see, as in the previous case it is a overloaded version, two overloaded version of the same program, but here it will basically get data T. Okay, fine, we can return the A and then get data S, return the S. It is exactly not overloaded, the two methods are there, but if we do not include T here, it could work for you also. Okay. So, no issue, int I, int j we have mentioned here, because ith element in the array can be returned whatever it is there, same. Okay. But here the return type is different, and then without this T get data it could work for you also, and overloaded can be done, but here overloaded, non overloaded, anything is there, but we can do it anyway. So, this basically define a method generic class with two overloaded method, and I want to declare one more method reverse, because we are here dealing with array, there may be one task that reversing the elements objects in this array as well as in this array. So, two different method is required, because say it is one type, it is another type. So, two different methods may be there, but we will consider that same method like in a generic way. and in the next you see that reverse. Okay, so this is another print data and print data. These are the two methods are overloaded method here. It is basically print the elements which is stored here of type T and S type T. So, we have declared generic class with two types, array of objects of type T and S, and method also we have declared, and for the getting any value and then printing any value. And now another method also we can declare regarding the reversing of elements. So, here this is the reverse array is the method, this is the reverse array, the same method name, but argument is T. That means this method will work for a collection of type T, this method will work for the collection of type S. The logic is basically straightforward to reverse the ordering of the elements. So, this completes the definition of a generic class with multiple types as well as overloaded methods in it. Now, having this declaration, now let us see how the main method will work. And here is an example of main method. As you see here, this is the demonstration of using the generic class that we have declared in the last slides. In this example, first let us create an array of string objects which includes 3 elements in it. Then also we declare 3 objects of type student stored in an array S. The 3 objects are initialized with these are the different values. This is the string for name, these are the 3 integer numbers storing their marks. Now, we create an object to store 2 values T and S, string and student, for example here, passing this T and S which we have created here to this one. So, here array data basically includes 2 arrays, this one T and S, and then store it. Now, so a generic program with 2 types different string and then student, one which student is user defined, is declared and used here. Now, let us continue this program. The next we see the different method call, namely get, print and then reverse, how it work. Now, here in this example, so array data is basically your collection with 2 types of arrays, and print data T is basically called the print data method for the type T. So, it will print the elements which is stored there in the string. Then array data reverse array T, so it will basically reverse the elements which are stored there in array of integers objects. Print data S, basically in this case S is student, so it will print the student data stored in the array S. Reverse array elements those are stored in the array S will be reversed, and after this reversing it will again print the data. So, 2 type of arrays, one storing integer values, another storing string, will be handled here in one single program. Not only this, any type of other you can run this and test it of your own so that it works for you. So, this basically signifies how the different types it can works for it. Now, in this context we want to mention one important check which is very important. So, if a class say A is declared as generic with any parameter, any number of parameter, no issue, any parameter, let it be T, then object of class can be created of that type. Type can be of anything. That is fine, right? We have learned about it, it works, it is okay. But if you are not careful about using the different methods belongs to those objects type, then it may invite some problem for you. It can occur during the time of compilation, that means at the compile time error, or sometime it is runtime error also. Now, let us illustrate this concept, that what sort of problem that it may arise whenever we can create a generic class. This is an example, just again you can look at. We declare as a generic class, name of the class is generic error, type is T specified here. So, according to our understanding, this T can be of any type, means it is integer objects, or it can be string, it can be double, it can be student or anything. So, this is array of objects for this class, and this is the constructor, it is as usual. So, these two things are obvious things in generic class discussion. So, absolutely no problem in okay. Now, let us come to here. Now, there is one method we have declared, the name of the method is average. The objective is that whatever the value it is stored here in this array, this method will find the average of this one. Now, here you note down, this basically is an array of objects, the method average will calculate the average value. So, the simple logic will look like this, is a for loop, for each elements into it will basically calculate the sum of all elements, and then it is basically total number of elements that is stored there, array dot length, sum divided by this average is there. Now, here you see array, the ith elements which is stored here, as it is stored as an object, because T is an object. So, from this object representation, if we want to calculate this average, that means this is basically the simple type, should be converted into either integer or double or float. So, it is basically double value. Double value usually if we call for any numeric type, it will basically return a value from object to its primitive type, because here we are storing is an object, and for the calculation of sum we need the primitive form actually. So, double value it is required to be invoked there. That means the simple, that means without this double value, if we write it, this is not valid, you will get error during compile time, it is an error. Okay, so that is why double value you have to do it. Now, once you just declare it, here is basically you will see if you run this program, this statement which is here, it will basically gives an error. The error is called compile error. Why? This is because this T type, assuming that can be any. Now, if it is numeric T, absolutely no problem, this program will work for you, but T not necessary to be only numeric, that means not necessary that it will be integer, it will be double, it will be float. If what will happen? If T is of type string, that means array store a set of string objects, then double value method is basically not valid for string. It is valid for only integer, but T can assume anything, it can assume string, it can assume student also, but for student this double value method is not defined, is undefined. As a consequence, it will give an error, compilation error. So, this is the one problem it is there, right, while you are writing the program you may not aware about, and it can invite trouble, then compile error. Now, so this is the one problem or rather is a concern about when you want to deal with this one. So, it needs to be checked. Definitely there should not be the point of worriedness. Java has the facility for dealing with this kind of situation. That situation is called bounding the arguments. That means we can define that whatever the template type that we have decided can be limited to only numeric type, or it can be only limited to some other type. So, we can do that, and which is very much essential in many situations. In the next lecture, we will discuss about this bounding of parameter arguments. You just go through these video lectures to understand the merits, the strength of generic methods and generic class, whether it is a single type or multiple type, whatever it is there. Now, few more advanced topics regarding the bounded argument parameters while defining generic class is also very important issues, which will be discussed in the next two video lectures. Thank you.